5 years after his death, the legacy of Fidel Castro, Cuban and Latin American revolutionary leader and one of the most prominent figures of the 20th and 21st century, lives on. Activists across the world mobilized this Thursday to mark the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. Palestinians have condemned the Israeli regime's plan to advance the construction of a new Jewish settlement in occupied East Jerusalem. From the headquarters of teleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South, and I'm Katrina Goss. 5 years after his death, the legacy of Fidel Castro, Cuban and Latin American revolutionary leader and one of the most prominent figures of the 20th and 21st centuries, lives on. According to Fidel's thought, it was impossible to transform the reality of Latin America without remembering its history and understanding the legacy of colonialism and imperialism in order to fight racism, poverty and exploitation. Achieving unity and the integration of Latin America and the Caribbean were fundamental to his strategic vision and represented continuity of the ideas of independence leaders such as José Martí and Simón Bolívar. Under these principles, Fidel conceived the Bolivarian Alliance for the Peoples of our America. Fidel was the world's greatest advocate of internationalism, and solidarity has been a pillar of Cuban foreign policy ever since he came to power, expressed in medical aid, cultural and sports missions in countries across the world. Fidel's greatest legacy is to demonstrate that there are alternatives to neoliberal and hegemonic capitalist models and that certainly a better world is possible. And Cuba experienced a special evening on Wednesday, the eve of the anniversary of the death of Fidel Castro. Students held a vigil on the grand staircase of the University of Havana as Cuba's youth paid tribute to their late leader. They were accompanied by leaders and government officials, including President Miguel Díaz-Canel and the Secretary General of the National Committee of the Young Communist League, Ailén Álvarez García. The evening event was the first of Cuba's tributes to the historic leader of the revolution on the 5th anniversary of his death. And 5 years after the death of the historic leader of the Cuban Revolution, the country's youth continue to find answers for the construction of socialism in his thought. Our correspondent Fabiola Lopez brings us more.
The year marking the 5th anniversary of Fidel Castro's entrance into eternity has been intense for the Cubans. Attempts at a soft coup and a failed revolution of colors have permitted the current situation on the island. Early in 2021, when the war of symbols against Cuba was increasing, the young intellectual Ernesto Teuma reflected on Fidel's idea of saving the culture first.
Only a political leader like Fidel Castro, who acted in a higher spirit, whatever may be said about him, everyone, even his enemies, recognized that he was a great political, cultural, military strategist. Without culture, without that creation of an identity, without that discourse that sustains political action, no politics is possible. No emancipation is possible. Culture is the first thing to be saved, because without culture, we will be unable to do anything. Without memory, we will be incapable of going towards the future. Without memory, we will be incapable of mapping the present, wouldn't we? Without culture, we will be unable to even consider building something different.
For Josué Benavides, a new researcher at the University of Havana, Cubans are living today in a time of political readjustment in terms of ways of understanding reality and ways of interpreting the meaning of the historical moment. Hence the need, he warns, to readjust the revolutionary practices.
You ask me if I see Cuba's socialism in danger. Of course I see it in danger. Fidel taught me to see socialism in Cuba in danger. Fidel all the time had a dual vision for understanding socialism in Cuba, first as a great strength and at the same time as being constantly in a moment of weakness, not only because you have a very powerful enemy very close, but because you have to challenge powerful dominant forces within the country. But the dominant forces inside are not precisely the mercenary groups that are tiny and do not make up a considerable number. They barely drag social classes, but bureaucratization, corruption, differences between leaders and average citizens. These are powerful dominant forces inside Cuba's socialism, and the poor have to think a lot about that, precisely to continue deepening the revolution.
When in April, the second leader of the 1959 epoch, Raúl Castro, announced that his term at the head of Cuba's communist was over, those who opposed the revolution thought that the post-Castro era was starting. Yet, young people like Luis Emilio Aybar emphasized that Fidel Castro still has a lot to say.
All the time they have been predicting the post-Castro era, and perhaps what they do not take into account is that Fidel, the revolution, is a compilation, it is a collective spirit, it is a school, and therefore this means that there is a Cuban revolutionary subject committed to those values, and therefore in some way we will continue in the Fidel era, which does not mean that we will not continue transforming, that we will not assume the task that is ours as a generation.
¿Acaso tú sabes la ruta? ¿Acaso ya pasaste antes?
It is the duty of future generations, says this sociologist, to enrich Fidel's legacy, even exceed it dialectically.
It is not a Manitian legacy, it is not a black and white legacy. It is a legacy that has its own contradictions as well, and then I believe that, as Fidel said in his speech addressed to the intellectuals, we have the final say.
How do you see Cuba's future?
The future of Cuba is one of struggle. As Fidel used to say, the homeland has only one thing to offer, and that is sacrifice and struggle.
La patria solo tiene una cosa que ofrecer: sacrificio, lucha.
Everything will seem to indicate that 5 years after the physical disappearance of the man who led the first socialist revolution in America, his ideas on this island are more alive than ever.
Fabiola Lopez, teleSUR, La Habana.
And this Thursday, November 25th, also marks 1 year since the death of Diego Armando Maradona, Latin American and worldwide football idol and social activist. A year ago, Maradona passed away at the age of 60 after suffering a heart attack at his home in San Andres neighborhood, Buenos Aires, Argentina. Maradona's football career is a prominent part of his legacy, but he was also well known for supporting leftist leaders and causes in Latin America. After his death, several heads of state and prominent figures paid tribute to Maradona, as well as thousands of fans. Argentina's government decreed 3 days of national mourning to honor a man considered the greatest Latin American football player of all time. Colombia saw fresh protests this Thursday as teachers and education workers took to the streets to demand that the Iván Duque administration comply with the agreements reached with the sector. The Colombian Federation of Education Workers called for a new day of mobilizations to commemorate 2 years since the national strike of November 21, 2019, and the 5th anniversary of the signing of the 2016 peace agreement. The organization announced a 24-hour nationwide strike to demand full compliance with the agreements signed in defense of peace, life and democracy at the negotiation table with the government. President of the Union Federation, William Velandia, stressed it's not an option for the Iván Duque administration to delay its total compliance with the agreements reached, including the urgent financing of public education.
We cannot accept the shamelessness of the government in this delay to not fulfill with the agreements made at the negotiation table as part of the heritage of a country's teachers and educational communities, and therefore on the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women. This is a call to all of our women because this affects them too. They are the union's majority.
And we'll be right back after this very short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. A square dedicated to women victims of domestic violence was inaugurated in the French capital as activists stressed the debate about femicide and domestic violence needs to be present in public spaces. The square was inaugurated by the local town hall as part of activities to mark the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women this Thursday, November 25th. It provides a space for families to remember their loved ones and to campaign for justice, as well as to raise awareness of the issue in the country. Authorities have been resistant to cracking down on gender-based violence. It was only this January that the French Senate approved a law setting an age of consent at 13 years old. In 2019, 146 women were killed by an intimate partner in France, making it one of the most dangerous countries for women in Europe.
The inauguration of these squares is very important for the families because it shows them that we do not forget their loved ones who disappeared too soon, and it also tells the women victims of violence that we think about them, and it should be duplicated in many more places. It also means that the debate about the femicide and domestic violence is starting to be in the public place, so to speak, and as long as the public opinion and its immense majority will not have ceased this debate and will oblige the government to change what is currently in place, nothing will change. So this is a step that is indispensable. The second step would be for this place to be duplicated in many other cities in order to make society truly aware of the ravages of domestic violence and femicide. It's really through media coverage and prevention that we will be able to change things.
In Mexico, women are fighting for the right to self-defense in a country where gender-based violence and femicides are reported in huge numbers. According to official figures, Mexico registered 736 femicide cases between January and September this year, not far off the number for the whole of 2020. Mexican women who defend themselves against their aggressors can end up behind bars, while their abusers escape justice. Activists stress that in a country where violence against women is endemic, the right to legitimate self-defense is a must.
What I demand is freedom for my daughter Rosana because she only defended herself from the person who threatened her that he was going to kill her for defending herself and not being able to do what he wanted. What he wanted was to kill her apart from raping her. He had threatened her that he was going to kill her, and what she did was defend herself. Why should a woman who has suffered a crime to prove that she actually suffered a crime? In other words, the public prosecutor's office will have to make use of all the mechanisms to carry out a full impartial investigation without any gender bias. I think that in these cases of defense, of legitimate self-defense, there are many factors. There is the fact that you have a good defense, but the authorities do their jobs as it should be done. That is, the family believes you, that society supports you, that they look after you, protect you, and that the media really shows what it's like.
And in Peru, people took to the streets to condemn gender-based violence as they marked the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women this Thursday. Members of a theatre group in Lima reenacted a funeral to protest against violence against women in the country on Wednesday, ahead of the International Day that seeks to raise awareness of gender-based violence. Elsewhere in the city, activists lit candles demanding justice for the victims of forced sterilizations under the dictatorship of Alberto Fujimori, abuse which an estimated 270,000 indigenous Peruvian women were subjected to.
Violence against women is part of our daily life. I think there is not a day when we wake up and there is no news about this issue, and we are angry, indignant, and want things to change. Violence against women is a pandemic. We have a COVID-19 pandemic, but we already had a pandemic of femicide violence. Where is the love for that daughter, for that mother who has been murdered, who has been taken from us? I really demand that justice be done, that there be no more impunity, no more violence, no more girls raped, because unfortunately there is a lot of sexual violence.
The Catholic and evangelical churches in Honduras have called for a peaceful election on November 28th and urged people to exercise their right to vote in a country that has seen high levels of political violence during the campaign. Both churches made the statements in the midst of the pre-election silence period currently in force across the country. Religious sectors called on all institutions, political sectors and citizens in general not to use the elections as a means to create a socio-political crisis in the nation. They also insisted that all members of society contribute to the good governance of the country after the elections. The statements come in the midst of the distribution of the electoral materials and a wave of political violence that has seen over 30 assassinations of candidates and more than 60 reported attacks. And we have more stories coming up after this final short break. Stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. Palestinians have condemned the Israeli regime's plan to advance the construction of a new Jewish settlement in occupied East Jerusalem. Local authorities have approved the plan for the construction of a new residential neighbourhood with thousands of homes for ultra-Orthodox Jews in a large area located at the site of the old Atarot airport, sandwiched between the Palestinian neighbourhood of Kaf Akab and the Kalandiya refugee camp in the far northwest corner of the city, largely beyond the separation wall with the occupied Palestinian territory of the West Bank. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry condemned the plan and urged the international community to intervene to prevent its implementation, as it marks yet another illegal move to expand Jewish settlements and the annexation of East Jerusalem in violation of international law. A car bombing left at least 8 dead and 17 wounded in the Somali capital, Mogadishu. The bomb was detonated around 7:30 a.m. near a school. Students and teachers were among the victims, while several sections of the facilities were destroyed. The bombing was claimed by the armed group Al-Shabaab, who said it intended to strike a United Nations security convoy passing near a school in Mogadishu. The Al-Qaeda-linked armed group said in a statement carried by its Andalus radio that Thursday's attack targeted Western officials being escorted by the peacekeeping convoy. The peacekeeping force was meant to withdraw from the country, but its mission could be extended amid concerns that Somali forces are not ready to assume responsibility for security. It was not immediately clear if any UN personnel were among the casualties. More than 150,000 Nigerian children are living with HIV, authorities said on Thursday, with many not receiving any treatment. According to the director of the Nigerian National Agency for the Control of AIDS, the country has made significant progress in recent years in the fight against HIV/AIDS. However, only 80,000 children are receiving regular treatment. Nearly 1.8 million people in the country are living with HIV, 90% of whom are aware of their status and 96% are receiving treatment. The agency stated it will continue pursuing campaigns and called on the public to get tested for the virus. The Chinese and Iranian foreign ministers held a video conference to discuss strengthened bilateral relations and cooperation. Wang Yi and his Iranian counterpart Hossein Amir-Abdollahian spoke on Wednesday and emphasized that this year marks the 50th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic ties between China and Iran. The Chinese foreign minister said that his country is ready to work with Iran to implement the Comprehensive Cooperation Plan and push for new achievements in the China-Iran Comprehensive Strategic Partnership. Wang noted that the so-called Summit for Democracy proposed by the United States is in essence a move to instigate division in the world under the banner of democracy. For his part, Abdollahian said the Comprehensive Cooperation Plan takes bilateral relations to a new stage and stressed that Iran resolutely opposes unilateralism, bullying, double standards and interference in China's sovereignty and internal affairs. The head of the World Health Organization warned on Wednesday that many countries have relaxed the restriction measures against COVID-19, believing that the vaccines have ended the pandemic, which is not the case.
Vaccines save lives, but they do not fully prevent transmission. Data suggests that before the arrival of the Delta variant, vaccines reduced transmission by about 60%. With Delta, that has dropped to about 40%.
The WHO Director General also warned that the reappearance of the pandemic in Europe is explained by the prevalence of the Delta variant and insufficient vaccination, in addition to the relaxation of antivirus measures. Countries such as Italy, France, Austria, the Netherlands and Slovakia have begun to reimpose measures to reduce contagion.
While Europe is again the epicenter of the pandemic, no country or region is out of the woods. It's important for all countries to surge their capacities now to ensure the right measures are in place to avert the worst consequences of any future waves.
And in response to a surge of COVID-19 cases across Europe, Italy announced new measures, including an accelerated booster dose of the vaccine and restrictions on non-vaccinated people. From December 6, only vaccinated people and those who have recovered from COVID will be able to access restaurants, bars, cinemas, theatres and fitness centres.
In this phase of the epidemic's progress and of such a complicated international context, we believe that for a period of time, which we indicate as being between the 6th of December and the 15th of January, we're introducing a strengthened version of a so-called Green Pass, in which, in order to have access to this certificate, only two functions remain in force. A Green Pass can only be obtained if you have been vaccinated or have recovered from COVID-19.
South African scientists have detected a new COVID-19 variant in small numbers and are working to understand its potential implications. The National Institute for Communicable Diseases said on Thursday that 22 cases of a new COVID-19 variant had been recorded following genomic sequencing collaborations between the institution and private laboratories. The acting executive director of the institute said although the data is limited, experts are working overtime with all the established surveillance systems to understand the new variant and its potential implications. Authorities said the new strain is behind a huge increase in reported cases, with daily infections shooting up to more than 1,000 on Wednesday. They also urge people to get vaccinated, wear masks, practice healthy hand hygiene, maintain social distancing and avoid crowded places. And we've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. You can also follow us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram and Telegram. For teleSUR English, I'm Katrina Goss. Thank you for watching.